Welcome to The Impact Effect, hosted by conscious leadership expert Tom Eddington, advisor to some of the world's most successful companies and CEOs, where each week we help executives, entrepreneurs, and organizers become more effective leaders while growing businesses that are making an impact in the world. And now, here's Tom.
Hi, welcome to the Impact Effect Network, a place where we discuss making business matter through conscious leadership. I'm Tom Eddington. My guest today is Diana Chapman, co-founder of the Conscious Leadership Group. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on the show today, and really look forward to our discussion. I'd like to start by just having you share a little bit about the Conscious Leadership Group, the work you're doing, and how you came to conscious leadership.
Okay, the Conscious Leadership Group is a small consulting organization that offers consulting, training, one-on-one coaching, forums, and speaking offerings to organizations focusing mostly in North America, but also more broadly around the world.
And how did you come to co-found the group?
I had been studying in the realm of conscious relationship for years, decades, and loved working with just the general audience around conscious relationship / leadership. My experience is that the term leadership means to take responsibility for your influence in the world. So all relationships really are leadership issues when you take responsibility for that relationship. And so was doing that for years, and then somehow got invited to join another facilitator at a YPO event, which stands for the Young Presidents Organization, and found that population to be a good fit with my personality and the pace at which I like to work. And so I shifted gears and moved over to working in the realm of conscious leadership in organizations, and then met Jim Dethmer. And we decided to put our two worlds together and create one organization and build upon that.
And what took you into the conscious relationship arena in the first place?
That's a great story. My brother-in-law at the time was the CEO of Monsanto. And while Monsanto wasn't getting great press as an organization, he was getting really great press as being a very thoughtful, conscious leader. And he said, Diana, I've studied with the world's finest coaches, and the couple I have gotten the most value from, both professionally and personally, is Gay and Kathleen Hendricks of the Hendricks Institute. And so he gave me $5,000 and he said, you can do whatever you want with this money. But if I were you, I would go to California and take a training with your husband and the two of you there. And so we did. And I can remember life before and after that training. It was a game changer. And I remember feeling very frustrated that I didn't have these tools and these awareness practices already at the age of, I think at 35 I was at that time. And so I decided I was going to dedicate my life to getting all of these things out there into the world. And that's how I got started.
And what specifically did you come away from the training with?
I specifically came away with understanding that in any given moment, I'm either in threat or I'm in trust. And I never even considered that was something to even look at. So, and then to find out, wow, I'm in threat a lot of the time, most of the time. And what do you do? How do you get from threat to trust? And then I learned all these tools that were pretty easy and practical, and I used them and they worked, and my relationships improved, and my well-being improved. And so, yeah, they were just a surprise to me. And I had been quite a seeker up until that point. I had been someone who was going to the personal growth workshops and things like that, but nobody delivered it in a models that were really easy to understand how important it was to look at my, what we say, context. From where am I being? Is it in threat or is it in trust? And that there's actual ways to notice that and identify and name it in the moment.
So how did you, we all, whether we're talking about our personal lives or our professional lives, we're all in relationship with other people. What did you have to do when you moved into the work you're doing now? What sort of translation? What sorts of relanguaging? What sorts of changes did you have to make? Or did you just take that content that you learned from them and presumably others and just take it wholesale into the work environment?
Yeah, I learned that I needed to change the language a little bit, because how I had heard it, that some of the words and the lingo weren't probably going to be, well, I tried it actually. I tried going into the business world that way and I got spit out. So I realized, okay, I need to change the language and make it much more mainstream and in ways that didn't feel odd or weird to those people. And so that was, I think, one of the gifts that Jim and I have, and Kaylee Klemp, who helped co-write our book, The 15 Commitments, is that we were able to take a lot of these practices that were out there in the personal development world and make them really accessible to the business world, because we could language it in a way that they could hear.
For the benefit of our listeners, could you give a couple of examples of things you had to relanguage?
Yeah, let's see here. It was mostly, like, instead of saying above the line, you're in presence, which really what it is. But we just had to shift it to, you're in trust. You're in a state of trust. Or you're conscious. We were the conscious leadership group, but we didn't use conscious very much. When we talked about it, we would use trust. And when we talked about being below the line, is a model we use, above and below the line. Instead of saying you're scared right away, because most of them would say, I'm not scared, I'm here working. We would say there's some way you perceive some threat. And you're wanting, and specifically, you're just wanting to be right. And so if we would focus on wanting to be right rather than you're scared or in threat, that helped them be more willing to look at, how is that true?
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I noticed that when I'm working with that model of above and below the line, if I use fear below the line, people get that. But if I use love above the line in the corporate setting, people get kind of squirrely. And so I'll tend to use trust with that model until I've developed enough of a rapport and enough of a safe environment with people that they don't feel it's too wacky or woo-woo or whatever. And then at some point I can start using the word love and they're receptive to it.
Yes, that's my experience too.
Other examples where you've had to relanguage?
Let's see.
And I'm just asking because it's interesting how we'll put on a persona when we go to work that's different than who we are when we're outside of work.
Yeah. There are things like exercises that we learned through Gay and Katie Hendricks, something called creative joint play, which is a really wonderful tool that you can use to help shift the body's brain and blood chemistry when it's reactive. But creative joint play didn't really work. So we just simply said, can you just move your body in these different positions? And we gave them examples. And so just the terms for different exercises that we had learned, we renamed most of those.
And do you once you've introduced that, do you stick with the language that you've introduced it with, or do you evolve it over time?
We try to stick with the language because they're going to then have new people coming into the organization. And we want the language to not be threatening to them either when they come in. So we like to try to create language that everybody's familiar with. It's not too odd. Now there's still a few things that people have to learn, like what is conscious listening?
Right.
But otherwise we try to keep it as mainstream as possible.
Got it. And when you're brought in by a client, whether it's a coaching situation or working with a leadership team or more broad-based organizational work, what's the journey you're attempting to take the individual or the organization on?
So we like to use the 4 questions of conscious leadership. So the first thing we want to do on their journey is just help them locate themselves. So we say, we want you to be able to say in any given moment, are you in a state of threat or are you in a state of trust? And we want to get you really good at that without making that mean anything that one is better than another as best we can. And then secondly, put some attention on deeply accepting ourselves and each other when we are in these fearful, threatened states, and building some muscle around that, which is quite difficult actually for most people
Yep.
to do that. And then giving them lots and lots of tools for how to be able to shift, and practical tools, and having them practice and practice and practice so that those become a way of life. And understanding the difference between whether they're actually willing to shift or not. And if not, what can they do to still keep learning, even if they want to stay in a threatened state for the moment.
So with this work, when the clients bring you in, what are they expecting, and how do you help them see what's in it for them?
Well, I think most of them are expecting to want to learn how to get along better. Want to learn how to feel more confident in their decisions. They want more energy. They want to think more creatively. And so it's almost always word of mouth of how people bring us in, because some other leader has said, hey, this really has been beneficial for us. We're having more honest conversations. We tend to listen to each other. Our meetings tend to be shorter. We're not talking on top of each other. We tend to be more willing to collaborate in creating decisions that have a diversified perspectives. So we like the results. So it's either that or the book. And so that's what they're expecting, is to have some of that.
Yeah. And what are you seeing in terms of the kinds of organizations or leaders that are finding you? Obviously, it's it sounds like it's coming from referral, but what are you seeing in terms of whether it's diversity of industry or types of organizational stages of development, or other attributes or characteristics you're seeing in the organizations that are receptive to your work?
I would say it's really more about the leaders who are finding us, and those leaders come from so many different industries. So we have, people in hospital systems and manufacturing and the tech world and pharmaceutical worlds, and I mean, all over the place. Yep. And they're big and small. They're, as far as organizational sizes go, somebody who was in the HR of a city government called us. It's usually people who have just found out about the work, and it's not necessarily based on industry. However, I do think that the young millennial leaders are valuing this more than the older leaders. And so, at least for me, I'm finding that a lot of young startup founders are particularly easily valuing this and wanting to bring us in.
And what would you say are the qualities or the characteristics of the folks that are bringing you in?
I think they themselves have already been on somewhat of a journey. Maybe they were in therapy, or they've done some of their own personal development. They've been reading, and they have found it to be valuable for their own selves. And so they're interested to continue to keep exploring more. And those are usually the ones who are finding us.
So curiosity.
Curiosity.
Other characteristics or attributes?
Just, a quest for learning.
Yeah.
I'd also say being willing to play that edge of the unknown, being willing to be uncomfortable. Yeah. Because it's edgy to have to go face, something that over there and that person that we call it X out, I'm not like that. And then to go, oh, that lives in me too. Yeah. You have to have guts and courage to do this work.
Yeah. And what do you see people go through? What's that journey look like for them? In terms of efficacy, in terms of emotional roller coaster or whatever. What does that journey look like for leaders as you're taking them through it, and for the teams?
I think first of all, people are starting to understand. We do a lot of work with personas. So we say, hey, you're a personality that's made up of a lot of personas here. And we want to have you start to get to know what personas most are engaged when you're working with your colleagues. And are you aware of that? And is that a conscious choice? And are these the best personas that you want to bring forward? Or are there other ones that would be helpful? And when you get into an interlock with somebody else, it's typically a persona interlock. And so we want to have you get to know that. So, and where do those personas live in something we call the Cartman's drama triangle? And so we get them very familiar with their patterns first, so they can start to see them and make choices about whether they want to use those or not.
So how do you define conscious leadership?
Well, we say conscious is to be here now and not in the past, not in the future, in right here, my butt in this chair right here.
Yeah.
To be here now, and to be here now in a non-triggered, non-reactive state.
Mm-hmm.
So that in of itself is something we're all cultivating. And then to be able to take responsibility for your influence in the world is our definition for leadership. And so influencing from a non-triggered, non-reactive state that's really present here to what's going on.
Yeah. So talk about cultivation. How do you cultivate your own conscious leadership? What are your practices? What do you do on a daily basis, weekly basis, yearly basis to show up as a conscious leader?
I have many daily practices. So one of my favorite practices currently is anytime I find myself being averse to something, I stop and take a look at what's the threat underneath that aversion. So yesterday I had a party actually for a lot of clients came over and that invited their children to come and be in the pool. And I have some toys that I've collected that I share with the kids when they come. And there were a couple of kids who wanted to take home some toys. And I noticed at first I had a little bit of an aversion to them asking to take my toys. And I realized, what is that about? And I have this personality that can get caught in, you shouldn't ask for things. You should just take care of everything on your own. You shouldn't ask for people to give you things. That's not okay. So I realized that right in the moment, I realized, oh, that's something that I haven't fully loved in myself, is the one who just wants to ask for what she wants. Mm. So I caught that right away. Then I noticed feeling scarce around my toys. These are cool toys. I've taken a long time to collect them. And I thought, well, if I give them away, will I be able to find replacements and I need to replace them? And so I caught myself being really attached to not wanting to give the toys away. And so I decided I wanted to shift that fear. So I thought to myself, like, could it be just as okay to not have those toys? Is the world okay? Are the next set of kids coming to play? Are they okay? And I realized, like, there is no problem here. And I happily gave them the toys they wanted. Yeah. And that's just such a silly little thing. But all of that happened within, that was all going on in my head in over about 3 minutes. Yep. And I was just watching myself and felt just a tremendous amount of abundance and joy having them skipping out the door with their new toys and realizing they gave me a lesson. They taught me something today. And that's how I'm always looking at everything, is anything that's that I see out there that I experience as an aversion is just here to teach me. And that's my practice I do all day long.
Yeah. That's a great practice. Thank you for sharing that.
You're watching the Impact Effect Network. Who you are is how you lead. Conscious leadership is an intuitive, intentional process requiring an open heart, an open mind, and a committed desire to fully own how you show up in the world. If you're a CEO, a solopreneur, or a community leader, Tom Eddington's ebook helps you amplify your strengths, making you the best version of yourself. Download the ebook today and become a part of bringing conscious leadership to the planet.
Other practices?
I often wake up in the morning, and my very first practice in the morning is this.
I always wake up in the morning. I always wake up in the morning, or at least I have for my whole life.
So far, I have too. But I love to just give myself some appreciation and gratitude for just being this character, this human being. And with all of both what is beautiful and what is challenging about being this human being, just to start my day with being grateful for being me.
Yep.
That's one of my favorites. Another one of my practices, I have something called morning tears. I think that one of the ways that people leave being able to be present is they have difficulty feeling heartbreak. I know that has certainly been my experience. And so I have a practice called #MorningTears, in which I go look for something where I feel heartbroken. And that could be heartbroken because I'm in pain about what I'm seeing or reading, or heartbroken because it's just so beautiful. My heart's breaking open. It's more than I'm used to. So either direction, I'm finding something to cry about. And that's a practice I do most mornings.
And other practices throughout your day? And I love that you're starting your day with that intentionality around self-care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm always throughout the day questioning, can I see the opposite of all of my stories? I mean, that's just it's just now like breathing for me. Throughout my day, I have been asking the question, is this exquisite? I have my phone asking me that question randomly throughout the day. And I love looking down and pausing and seeing, can I find a way that my moment could be even more exquisite, whether that's sitting up a little straighter and creating a more exquisite experience of breathing, to is there something I could ask for, or is there something I want to change about how I'm experiencing myself in that moment that I want to alter to create even more exquisiteness. That's one of my new favorite practices.
That's a beautiful practice. I love that. Mm-hmm. And especially that you're having your phone prompt you so that you're not only relying on your daily routine to prompt you.
Yeah, it's certainly creating more of a heavenly experience. All kinds of little alterations I make throughout the day because of that question.
And do you have a contemplative practice, and how does that fit into your life?
Yeah, so I'm meditating daily, and I don't have a significant meditation practice. I usually do about 10 minutes a day, sometimes more. Sometimes mm-hmm. I crave more, but and I also spend a lot of time in nature. If you look behind me, I live in the redwoods here in California, and I'm out being with the wind through the trees and the bees on my lavender, and liking to just be with nature is another one of my practices.
Yeah, that's an incredibly important practice for me. It's something I incorporate into my daily routine. Mm. And what about spiritual practice?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that anything isn't a spiritual practice. I don't. Yeah, everything to me feels like a spiritual practice. So nothing in particular. If you know me, I'm not one for. What would I say? I'm not one for rituals mm-hmm. very much. I'm not one for making meaning of many things. Isness is my love is always here, and I'm always doing my best to stay in union with it. That's
Yeah. Well, just the reference you made to nature and the bees on your lavender. I mean, those for me are spiritual experiences, and it's part of my daily practice and routine is just to be in nature as much as possible and just to be present to what's happening around me.
Yeah, can I just be with the awe of it all? Like it's just mind-blowingly beautiful, and the synchronicity of it all, and the interconnectedness. It's just like my job is just to see, can I have my mind be more and more blown away by the awe of it.
Yeah, something I've done in terms of my daily practice. I study with a Tibetan Rinpoche, and I've been studying Buddhism for, I guess, probably about a dozen years. But I find here in the West, especially, it's hard to carve out time every day for prolonged meditation, to do the mantras and all of the things that are part of the ritual of being a practicing Buddhist. And a couple of years ago, the Oracle of Tibet was in San Francisco, and I had a chance to have a couple of meetings with him. And he was just commenting that, in the West, your lives are very different than ours in the East. And he said something you could do that's a really simple practice is before you have a meal, recite. And one of the commitments I've made to my teacher is I have a specific mantra that I'm supposed to say 15 times a day. And so before each meal, I'll just reflect on the meal before eating it and recite the mantra 5 times. And I have 3 meals a day, so I end up getting my 15 mantras in. But more importantly, as a systems thinker, I think about where did that food come from? Not only, the people who were in the store that prepared it and packaged it, but the people who made it possible for it to be in the store, and all of their family members, and whether it's the people who work at the local water company that made it possible for water to be with my meal. And I think about all of the thousands and thousands of people that made that meal possible for me, including the farmers and whomever, as I'm reciting the mantra. And it's just a way for me to connect with other beings and to be immensely grateful for the meal I'm about to have.
Yeah, that's beautiful practice. I love doing that. I love sitting around the table and imagining how many people influence that meal.
Yeah. And for me, it's just, it is part of my spiritual practice, and it happens to come out of a Buddhist tradition in some ways, but it's so much bigger than that. It's so much grander than that. And it's just an acknowledgement and a connection with all of humanity and all of the pollinators, whether it's the hummingbirds or the bees or the butterflies that helped make that happen. And it's just a wonderful way to be grateful for being alive.
Beautiful.
What are some other things that you do with either in your daily practice or with your clients to help them become more present?
I like to make all drama bigger. So I say, okay, what's something that you do and can you make it, exaggerate it so much that it's ridiculously funny? So if I'm working with, perhaps I'm working with the CEO and the COO, and they're having a challenge because the COO thinks the CEO isn't listening. So I might say, okay, I want you to have a conversation, and I want the CEO, just everything the person says, make it even more, don't listen. Go even bigger into the pattern. So I have them go bigger into the pattern until they both start to giggle. And so that my experience is that it's very challenging to shift drama if it's not funny.
Yep.
And so I want to make everything a little fun. And so how can we exaggerate all of our patterns that we do so they're a little funny, and then we can accept them because they're lovable when they're funny.
Yep.
And then we're much more likely to be aware of how to shift them.
Yep.
So I love playing with all of our shit. It's just, if you can step away, it's all so funny.
Yes.
And so I like helping others see that.
Yeah, I've got a similar technique I use in coaching where I'll have a client that has raised something it's very heavily weighing on them, and it's fear-based. And so I'll just ask them to play with me and just to take it to the ultimate extreme where, they're worried about, not getting a project done. And I'll say, well, what happens if you don't get it done? And then what happens? And, before you know it, we've gone down this path of, well, the project didn't get done, so they get reprimanded, and then they end up getting fired, and then they lose their money, and then they end up homeless, and then they end up dying, and nobody shows up at their funeral, and they're forgotten. And we just take it down this absurd path until they finally get to a point where they realize that all of the fear they had about a deliverable or a project or whatever was just fear-based and just silly.
Yes. Yeah, that's another wonderful way to do it.
But it almost takes that blowing it out of proportion and thinking about bigger than realistic consequences for people to realize that the drama they had around was just fear-based anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I find, and I suspect you do as well, that when you take them to that point and they laugh about it, they've discharged that energy, and then they can become more present to just who they are and where they are in the moment.
Yeah, the practice I'm doing is a little bit different in that I'm saying take the actual thing you're doing and make that thing bigger,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, so that they can catch, because they're going to do it again. so that they can catch it in the moment.
Yeah.
So it's more around, can you notice the pattern by, if it's, I interrupt, that's one of my patterns I've been playing with. I notice I interrupt people sometimes. I've been getting that feedback. So I've been purposely telling people I'm going to play with it. So I interrupt them a whole bunch and I make it really big. And so so I start to really see how much I'm doing it and what's underneath it. And often I can't see what's underneath it unless I exaggerate it.
You're watching the Impact Effect Network, the world's first 24-hour on-demand business and leadership video and podcast network, bringing conscious leadership to a global audience.
So how do you make it safe for people to give you that feedback? What are some of the things you do so that people feel and recognize you're open to and you see the feedback as a gift?
Well, I make agreements with my friends and clients and colleagues that our agreement is that if we have any feedback for one another, and especially if it's something that we notice we have an aversion to or something that we don't like, that we make an agreement to give that feedback. So that's a first place to start, is making sure that I have those clear agreements. And then secondly, I ask a lot.
Yep.
Do you have feedback for me? I want to learn. So the more I ask, the more I get to hear how I'm being experienced by others.
So you're setting that expectation that you're wanting the feedback so you can learn.
Yes, and then I set it up with myself and others that, hey, if we don't give each other feedback, then we're actually keeping the pattern going. And that's important, because if I don't say something, then now I have a part to play, and I'm as equally responsible if that pattern continues and it's not of service in some ways to myself or others.
Right. And what do you notice it does in terms of the quality of your relationships?
Well, we have some pretty strong evidence that when you start to withhold from other people, you start to withdraw and you start to feel less connected. And so what I notice is, for myself and others, is that in revealing to one another, we keep a connection. And that matters a lot.
Yep. And so what sorts of things do you hear from colleagues, from friends, from clients about the nature of the quality of the relationship they have with you and the quality of relationship they have with others?
Well, I think reliably people say, if I have a relationship in which we're both not blaming, we're both willing to let go of being right and feel our feelings and reveal to one another and make and keep our agreements, or change them very thoughtfully, we don't have much drama. It's pretty fun. And then we get to put our attention on creativity and collaboration and play, and that changes a lot.
Yep. So when you look at the journey you've been on since doing that initial work with Gay and Katie, how would you describe your life and what's shifted or changed for you?
When I first got involved in this work, I was one of those people that required everybody to need me. And so I had a lot of people would call in, and I'd feel very valuable because I had some great advice to give you. And but then I would complain that, why does everybody seem incompetent? Or, I'd have my dramas with people. And so, since doing all this work, I would say, I have an exquisite marriage. We have so much fun, very little drama. My 2 adult children, they've been living with us. The 4 of us, just such little drama in our household. My friendships are exquisite. I love my clients. I get feedback reliably from them. We address challenges that come up. And it doesn't mean that stuff doesn't happen, but I'm pretty able to learn and shift quickly. So I just don't have much stress. Life is sweet.
Yeah, one of the things I spend a lot of time working with my clients on is this silly notion of work-life balance. And I let them know that there's only life, and they've chosen the life that they're living. And So when you describe this exquisiteness that you're experiencing, and no stress, I'm hearing it as you're living the life that you want to be living.
I am. I have committed about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, or longer actually now, to living a life of zero obligation. And I only do what I really want to do. I'm very committed to that. And so, yeah, I work when I want to work, and I stop when I want to stop. And yeah.
And so how do you just, for the benefit of our listeners, how do you manage just the practical realities of life of, being able to pay the bills and have the financial security that you need to fulfill your obligations and commitments and still live that life that you're living and work in the way that you want to be working?
I never thought about that before. How do I fulfill my I just, I do work I love, and people pay me well for it. And I have plenty of money to do what I need and want and get the support I want. And, yeah, it's just, that part's always been easy for me. I don't know why. I think I just believe it can be easy. And so it is.
Yeah, for me, I am very intentional about what I do and how I'm living my life. And I made a conscious decision to be living my life from a place of trust a number of years ago. And just trusting that everything will be fine and everything will be as it's supposed to be. And I'm hearing in what you're saying that you're in some ways living your life from that place as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I just trust it'll all work out, and it does. And sometimes I don't understand how we got to it all working out, but it did. And I'm very, I'm very thoughtful in strategizing and saying, okay, if I want to, get to this point, what do I need to do, and how do I stay committed? And so I put some strategies in place, but I also it just happens.
Yeah, it feels to me as though it's a foreign concept for our culture to take all of that left brain kind of activity and at the same time living our life from a place of trust. And it almost feels countercultural, counterintuitive, and yet I believe I'm a living example that it's possible. It sounds like you as well.
Yeah, I think finding that rhythm, and each person's rhythm and balance is so different, and honoring just what's your unique way you like to do things.
So how do you share that with your clients, and how do you language it? How do you role model it? How do you help them see what's possible?
Around
the way you're approaching your life, the way you're living your life, the example you're setting in some ways.
Well, all we're doing at the Conscious Leadership Group is helping people learn to recognize when they're in a state of threat or fear, and see if they want to shift that. And if they do, here's how you can shift it. And if you don't, here's what you can keep learning if you're not willing to shift. That's it. That's all we're putting our attention. And that what we say is that's all about context.
Mm-hmm.
And that once you address context, all the content resolves it. It works itself out. So that's how I explore all those topics, is really just coming back over and over again to context.
Yep. And I get that on one level, but on another level, you are a living example of what the payoff is when you're living your life from that context.
Yes. And I think the reason why people often are attracted to work with us is because there's something palpable that they can feel when they're around others who are living this way, and there's a transmission that they can take in. And so that's really, I think, a big part of my value is being the being who can hold that field for that kind of awareness and transformation.
Yep. So what are your hopes for where this could go? Not just for you and Jim and your organization, but for society, for the human species, for the world.
Well, I have a big vision, which is my vision is that every organization recognizes that paying attention to whether one is in threat or in trust is key to their success on every level.
Mm-hmm.
And that be embedded into our education systems. We start working with children early on to know how to be able to locate oneself and shift oneself, and that be part of all kinds of, if you're getting reviewed on, your success at creating certain products, you're also getting reviewed on your ability to locate yourself. And that just be culturally embedded so that we have shared language for how we can talk to one another, so that we can address when these challenges arise and support ourselves and each other in shifting. And I just think that would be a lot of fun.
You're watching the Impact Effect Network. Is your team tuned out? Are you looking for a powerful speaker to motivate and inspire your organization? Then Tom Eddington is the choice for keynote speaker at your next conference or event. Tom is one of the most sought-after business advisors and coaches in Silicon Valley. For over 2 decades, Tom has advised world-renowned CEOs and executives on how to catapult their organization's success, including Hewlett-Packard, NBNA Corporation, and Royal Dutch Shell. In his dynamic keynotes, Tom offers fresh new paradigms on how to create healthier, happier, and more purposeful workplaces while navigating change and generating higher degrees of success for organizations. For information on booking Tom at your next event, contact eddingtonadvisory.com.
Have you explored bringing this into the school setting?
Yes, I started actually teaching this many years ago, maybe 15 years ago, in the 5th grade classes of my children's school, and then have worked with a lot of other coaches who are now bringing it into schools. And so I am not doing that personally, but I'm supporting a lot of other coaches in doing so.
That's wonderful, because it truly is life-changing.
Yes. Yeah, and the kids get it so fast, faster than adults. Yeah. I taught my kids the drama triangle when they were 4 and 6 years old, and they got it immediately. And then I had free coaching for the rest of my days, because anytime there was now any expression that I said, they could immediately say, "Hey, Mom, you're below the line. You're either the victim, villain, or hero." And they never missed a beat. They were perfect in their coaching of me.
For the benefit of our listeners, could you just quickly describe the drama triangle and help folks understand what you're referring to?
Sure. So Stephen Cartman said, "Hey, it looks like most of us learned how to be in a relationship from victimhood. And there are 3 unique flavors. So there's the pure victim, and it's hard, and I'm trying, and I don't have the power, and they do, or any kind of whining of any sort. That's the role of the victim. Then the villain's job is to blame. So it's me, I should be different, or you should be different, or them. I mean, we know who they are that are screwing this whole thing up. So we're finding someone to blame. And then the role of the hero is the third role. And the hero's job is to seek temporary, and that is the key word, temporary relief. And so I'm burnt out at the end of the day. What can I do to hero myself, to give myself a little relief? My favorite's a glass or 2 of Pinot Noir, or some binge watching of Netflix, or some people will talk about gaming or going for a run, or something that gives them temporary relief, and it works. But we don't go take a look at, how did I set myself up that I'm so fried at the end of the day? And so we can hear ourselves, hear others, don't be upset. Everything's okay. You shouldn't feel any kind of pain. I'll take care of it for you, or them, let's save those people. We'll put a philanthropy together, and we'll give them temporary relief over and over again, but not really ever solve the issues.
And what's the antidote to the drama triangle?
So the antidote is, instead of being a victim, I shift to being a creator. And I recognize I'm the creator, certainly, of my direct experience inside. I create my upset. So I own that. I recognize that. I also create a lot of the circumstances around me, not all, because I have some things that are in my control and some things that aren't. But for what I do have control of, I take responsibility that I create that. Instead of being a villain, I'm now a challenger. I provide some loving pressure instead of criticism, instead of blame, toward myself and toward others. And instead of being a hero, I become a coach. So if you're hungry, instead of feeding you a fish every night, which is what the hero would do, I would coach you to learn how to fish for yourself.
Thank you for that. It's something I learned from you and Jim years ago, and have incorporated into my own work. And it's amazing how, it makes so much sense for folks, and it goes back to they absolutely love it, and it helps them have a framework and a tool for dealing with the drama in their life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just caught myself interrupting. So, good to catch it.
So what other sorts of things would you like to share with regard to tools you've found to be particularly helpful? I mean, above the line, below the line is a great model for folks from my experience.
Okay. I have two tools that I would like to offer. So one of my favorite tools that we use at the Conscious Leadership Group is called Teach the Class. So what that means is you define some challenge that's going on in your life that you wish would change. So you can do this as an individual, you can do this as a team, you can do this as a whole organization. What's the challenge that you all have or you individually have? Then we say, you are now going to be a professor at a university, and everybody who's attending the class has come and they want to create the same challenge you have in your life. So we want you to teach them how they're going to create that challenge just the way you have. Now, that's wild for most people because they're usually thinking they're supposed to create the solution. And we say, no, create the challenge that you currently have. How do you do it? Teach us. And that is very valuable for people to start to take responsibility for how they're creating their results. So I had someone I was coaching yesterday who said, I can't count on my team member to have my back, and so I don't trust her. So I said, great, I want to make sure I don't count on my team member the way you do. What should I do? So at first he was baffled. And I said, well, do you make agreements on how you're going to do things to make sure that she knows what to do? And he said, no, I don't always make agreements. Do you share with her when something does fall through the cracks? Do you reveal that right away? No, I don't do that. So he started, and then he goes, okay, I got it. And then he could keep rolling with it and started to get with, I make sure I can't count on her. I'm actually committed to not counting on her. I organize myself that way. And that was for him just, wow, I thought this was all about her. And now I'm realizing that this is really all about me.
Yep.
So that's one of my favorite tools. We do that a lot, and we do that with teams and have people whiteboard, and there's a lot of humor can come out of that one. And we also like to, Professor John, would you come up? And they, welcome to my course. And they give a funny name for it, and we like to play it up a little bit. Then another one of my favorite shift moves is whatever the issue is that you're talking about, that you want to work on, we're going to have you write down what are the facts related to that issue. So the facts we define as whatever the camera records without interpretation. So for example, the camera would record that I have hair, but whether my hair is mid-length or what the color of my hair is or the style is that would all be a story. Mm-hmm. And so we have facts and we have stories. So we say, write down around this issue all your facts and then write down all your stories about those facts. And then our question we have everybody do is to take a look just at the fact list. And if there were no stories, is there anything about those facts that is a problem or upsetting? And egos don't like that. But they go, gosh, actually, if I can't have a story, there's no upset. It's just, and So we help people see that the facts have not caused them any upset, only their stories about the facts. And that, again, is one of those, for a lot of people, wow, I'm the cause of my experience. And so that's a wonderful exercise we use that gives people a very direct experience of what it means to be the creator of your life.
Well, what I love about those two examples and the resources you're using is it allows folks to use one of the most powerful things in the universe, reframing.
Yeah, reframing. Yeah.
Because we all are storytellers. I mean, it's the nature of being human, and we're all narrators of our life and our environment, and it's easy to get caught up in the story we've created. And you've just shared two really wonderful examples of tools that can be used to reframe a completely made-up story.
Yeah. So people really like those particular tools. And so now in our cultures that we coach, it's very common that the language is a story I make up is.
Yeah.
And that's something now that people are thoughtful to do, recognizing that my story is not a fact, which often we speak of our stories as if they are. Like my story is, even like we've been playing around with, my story is you're late. Because we help them see that late is a story.
Yep.
And that's a wild thing to have them understand, that the facts are the clock says 5 after 10 and the story is you're late.
Yep. So we haven't talked specifically about it, but you've referred to it several times, commitments. And
yes.
I'd love for you to just riff a little bit on commitments and where that fits in your life personally and the work you're doing with your clients.
Yes. So for commitments, we say a commitment is a way you're organizing yourself. It's an energetic, it's not a moral issue. And so for commitments, we say you're always committed, and you know what you're committed to by looking at your results. So some of the results that you have in your life are conscious commitments because they're things that you said you wanted, and some of the things that are happening in your life are unconscious commitments. They're happening and they're not what you want. And so we help people understand how to own those unconscious commitments and then make them conscious, and then see if they want to keep them going or not.
What does that process look like? I suspect it's rather painful for folks to go through that.
Yes, it can be, but it's also liberating. And so one of my favorite exercises, we have everybody talk about an issue that they've got going on, and then they own it as an unconscious commitment. And then we say, we do this with teams, and we say, we're going to have a conscious cocktail party, and you're going to go introduce yourself, and you're going to say, I'm committed to having poor communication on our team, or I'm committed to not being listened to by my boss, or I'm committed to, and they all own it and walk around, and the feedback is that was liberating.
Yep. Yeah, I'm familiar with and do a lot of work with competing commitments, but I haven't used it in the context that you're describing, where folks are explicitly being requested to uncover their unconscious commitments and own those as well.
Yeah, and that's where teaching the class really helps them understand that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what's the one thing you'd like for folks to take away from our conversation this morning?
To the extent that any of this is valuable, we have a website, www.conscious.is. And on that website, one of the things that has mattered to us is to make resources available for anybody who's interested in this work. So we have loads of videos and guided visualizations and all of our handouts and blogs, and we make everything available there, and you can take it and use it. And so I want to make sure that if there's any interest at all here for you, that's someplace you can go to get started right away to learn a lot more about these ideas.
Well, thank you, Diana. It's been such a joy to be with you today.
Thank you. I'm really happy to connect. I always love talking about this topic.
Well, it certainly shows, and thank you.
You're watching the Impact Effect Network. Thank you for joining Tom Eddington on the Impact Effect. Visit impacteffectnetwork.com to connect with Tom and discover additional episodes featuring today's top leaders making a global impact through conscious leadership in the world today.